At Skybound Airlines, one man's quiet resistance would unravel more than just an outdated system. It would confront an industry anchored in tradition and ignite a movement toward change. Marcus Green, the visionary CEO, was no stranger to turbulence, but this time, the storm was personal. Nestled within the VIP terminal of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the Southern Sky Bistro exuded an understated elegance. Sunlight streamed through vast panes of glass, illuminating the polished wood interiors and casting gentle shadows over the marble floor. The low hum of jazz floated through concealed speakers, blending seamlessly with the soft clinks of glasses and silverware. Leather chairs, perfectly arranged around candlelit tables, created an oasis of calm in the heart of airport chaos. It was a Friday, and the bistro buzzed with life. Business travelers exchanged hurried pleasantries, airline staff chatted about upcoming routes, and tourists sipped wine, soaking in their surroundings. The aroma of fried chicken, buttery lobster bisque, and freshly baked cornbread mingled with the ambient scent of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. It was an atmosphere that balanced Southern hospitality with European sophistication. Marcus Green slipped through the entrance unnoticed. Clad in a tailored charcoal gray suit, his quiet demeanor and fluid gait gave him the air of someone who commanded respect without demanding it. In his hand was a soft leather briefcase, worn but cared for, a companion through years of travel and change. He moved with purpose, each step echoing lightly on the floor as he approached a quiet table tucked into the corner. Despite his powerful role, Marcus never sought the spotlight. His legacy at Skybound was not just one of growth, but of transformation. Under his leadership, the airline had become a symbol of progress, known for promoting equality and inclusion in an industry often resistant to such ideals. But today, a heaviness lingered in his chest. He had just launched a sweeping initiative to overhaul hiring practices, opening doors for underrepresented communities long kept on the fringes. It was bold, controversial, necessary, and it had come at a cost. Seated now, Marcus opened his sleek black notebook, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting, ideas, revisions, and hopes. He had a clear view of the bustling restaurant and the runway beyond. As he began to write, a familiar rhythm returned to him, a sense of grounding amidst uncertainty. But the moment shattered as raucous laughter rang out from the entrance. 3 pilots in sharp navy blue uniforms entered with swagger. The Skybound Airlines logo gleamed on their jackets, and their loud, confident banter pierced the room's elegant atmosphere. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized Jake Peterson instantly, a seasoned pilot with a reputation for arrogance. Jake's deep voice cut through the space with unfiltered disdain. "I'm telling you," Jake barked as he flung himself into a nearby chair, "this diversity crap is killing the industry, giving jobs to people who don't deserve them. It's a joke." Tony Rohr, lounging across from Jake, laughed. "Yeah, it's like participation trophies all over again. Rewarding mediocrity." Marcus's grip on his pen tightened, the muscles in his jaw flexing ever so slightly. He remained still, his face unreadable. Years of enduring similar rhetoric had taught him the value of silence. But beneath the calm, a storm brewed. He knew these weren't just careless words. They were reflections of a system still deeply broken. Jake rambled on, oblivious. "Back then, it was all about skill. Now it's quotas. If you're not in the diversity crowd, good luck moving up." Tony smirked, his gaze drifting across the room before landing on Marcus. He leaned in and nodded toward him. "Bet that guy's one of them, a quota hire in management. Looks like they needed someone to fill a checkbox." Jake followed Tony's gaze and locked eyes with Marcus. His smile twisted into a sneer. "Or maybe he's here to tidy up after us," he said mockingly. "Keep the place neat for the real professionals." Time seemed to slow. The hum of conversation around them faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes, once soft, now shimmered with fire. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip of water, cataloging every word with quiet precision. These were the battles he had fought his entire career, the whispered doubts, the veiled insults, the condescending glances, but this moment wasn't about personal pride, it was about legacy. He let the silence linger, his stillness amplifying the weight of their words. The contrast between their boisterous ignorance and his poised composure was stark. He understood the stakes. If he responded in anger, he became the stereotype. If he stayed silent, he allowed injustice to echo unchallenged. So he did what he always did. He observed, absorbed, and planned. Tony chuckled again, louder this time. "Don't take it personal, old man," he called out. "You'll be fine, as long as you stay out of our way." Without acknowledging them, Marcus turned to a fresh page in his notebook and began to write. Not out of spite, but with renewed clarity. His pen moved with purpose, each word a quiet vow. This was more than strategy. This was survival. This was revolution in ink. The gears in Marcus Green's mind turned with quiet intensity. While the southern sky bistro remained vibrant with conversation and clinking glasses, an undercurrent of tension settled near his corner table. To most, it was invisible, a subtle distortion in the air, but to Marcus, it was unmistakable. The words hurled across the room by the pilots weren't simply offensive. They were a symptom of a deeper sickness within the system he had spent years trying to heal. Closing his notebook with a soft snap, Marcus returned it to his briefcase and leaned back, his features composed yet resolute. His exterior softened, but within him a decision was hardening like steel. Jake Peterson's voice grew louder, casually laced with contempt slicing through the ambience of the room. "Places like this used to be for professionals," Jake said, pushing back his chair theatrically and gesturing toward Marcus with a smirk. "Now? You've got guys like that. I don't even know what he's doing here." Tony chuckled. "Maybe he's scouting for a janitorial gig. Make sure the windows sparkle for the real players." Their laughter was sharp, careless. The third pilot at the table shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering nervously toward nearby diners who were now tuning in. Yet Jake persisted, tapping his fork against his plate like a drumbeat of disdain. "Or maybe he's a quota hire," he said, dropping his voice into a sarcastic lilt. "You know, management material, because someone needed to check a box." Marcus finally looked up, his gaze locking onto Jake's with a composure that unsettled the younger man. For a flicker of a second, Jake hesitated, but arrogance reclaimed him, and the grin returned, more forced than before. Around them, the room continued, but the air felt thick, as though every breath had to be pulled through the weight of unspoken tension. Marcus took a deliberate sip of water. He didn't flinch. He didn't fire back. He reached once more for his notebook and resumed writing, his pen gliding across the page like a calm current against a rising tide. To the uninformed, it may have seemed passive, but to Marcus, it was a tactical move, one he had refined over decades of navigating hostile rooms. Tony wasn't done. "I bet he's one of those big talkers," he said loudly. "All about the mission and the message, but zero follow-through, just riding someone else's coattails." Marcus continued to write, each stroke of ink a quiet defiance. He had learned that restraint was not weakness, it was mastery. It was knowing the right time to act, and the power of holding one's silence like a blade, sheathed until necessary. After a final stroke, Marcus gently closed the notebook, tucked it into his briefcase, and stood. The soft scrape of his chair against the marble caught attention once more. Eyes followed him as he approached a nearby waiter, speaking in low tones. Moments later, the restaurant's manager arrived. Young and poised, she introduced herself with practiced professionalism. "Mr. Green, I'm Emily Carter. Is there something I can assist you with?" Marcus studied her for a heartbeat. Her tone was steady, but her eyes hinted at unease. Still, she held her ground. "I wanted to ask about your guest policies," Marcus said, voice smooth but edged with clarity. "Specifically how you address breaches of your standards." Emily blinked but recovered quickly. "We strive to ensure all our guests receive the highest standard of service. This is a quality that is highly valued in the areas of service in sport and tennis." Dr. asked our star. He nodded, then glanced toward the pilot's table. "And when those standards are violated?" Emily's professionalism wavered. "We handle such matters as discreetly as possible to protect the experience for everyone." "Good," Marcus said simply. "Then I trust you will address what just occurred appropriately." She nodded, though uncertainty clouded her expression. "Of course." "Thank you, Miss Carter," Marcus added, offering a faint smile. "I trust you'll do your best." He returned to his table, gathered his things, and adjusted his jacket with meticulous grace. Then he turned to her once more. "Stay calm," he said quietly. "I'll handle this my way." The words lingered, calm yet electric. Emily nodded, visibly unsure but respectful. Marcus exited the bistro without another glance toward the pilots. He didn't need to. The decision had already been made. Outside, he pulled out his phone and dialed. The line connected instantly. "I need to meet with the board," he said. His voice was still smooth, but now it carried steel. "Today?" The engines outside roared, but Marcus's focus was absolute. A reckoning had begun. The VIP lounge offered a stark contrast to the confrontation earlier. Secluded, soundproofed, and soaked in the golden hue of late afternoon sun, it felt like a sanctuary, but Marcus found no peace. He sat near a towering window. The runway stretched out before him like a canvas of motion. Jet engines roared in the distance. Planes lined up, taxiing slowly, preparing to ascend. It was a view he had always loved. Today, it brought no comfort. His notebook lay untouched on the side table. Instead, he stared at his reflection in the glass. A man measured, weathered, and burdened by battles both past and present. The echo of the pilot's words circled in his mind, each one poking at an old wound. He wondered if he should have called them out directly. Would it have changed anything? Or would it have derailed his purpose? He remembered being a young pilot, eager, proud, and painfully aware that he didn't belong. The evaluations, the subtle exclusions, the way colleagues spoke around him rather than to him. The doubt had been constant. It hardened him. It also inspired him to build Skybound into a company that welcomed, not excluded. And yet, here he was, realizing how deep the roots of prejudice ran. The vibration of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. The screen flashed with a name. "Mr. Green," the board secretary said once he answered. "Everyone will be on the call in 5 minutes." "Thank you," he replied calmly. "Make sure they understand the urgency." He ended the call, his jaw set. Reaching for his tablet, he opened Skybound's internal database. He wasn't just preparing for a meeting. He was preparing for a transformation. A storm was coming, not outside, but within the walls of Skybound, and Marcus Green was ready to pilot straight through it. Marcus had already reviewed Jake Peterson's personnel file earlier in the year. It was pristine, at least on paper, but Marcus knew better. He understood how complaints could vanish under layers of bureaucracy, buried by sympathetic managers who saw no reason to escalate misconduct if it threatened the harmony of their inner circles. Clean records didn't mean clean consciences. Today, he would dig deeper. As the virtual board meeting began, Marcus adjusted his position so the camera captured him clearly. One by one, the faces of Skybound's directors flickered onto the screen. Their greetings ranged from perfunctory to pointedly cordial, but several held expressions etched with worry. They knew something serious was coming. "Let's get to the point," Marcus began, his voice calm but resolute. "This morning I witnessed a situation involving two of our pilots, Jake Peterson and Tony Rohr. Their behavior runs counter to everything Skybound stands for. I want a full review of their personnel files, including any past complaints." Silence followed. It stretched for a beat too long before a throat cleared. Edward Harris, one of the longest-serving board members, leaned forward. "Marcus," he said cautiously, "I understand your concern, but we have to tread carefully. If this leaks, it could harm the image we've worked so hard to build." Marcus didn't blink. "Our image means nothing if it's built on silence and avoidance. I'm asking for transparency, not a witch hunt." Anita Clark, a newer director known for her ethics-first mindset, nodded slowly. "I agree with Marcus. We've built our brand around integrity. If there's a problem, we owe it to everyone, employees and passengers alike, to address it." Edward leaned back, expression unreadable. His tone, however, carried a measured skepticism. "And what's the goal here? Terminate pilots over one conversation?" "No," Marcus said, sharper now. "I want the truth. If this is part of a larger pattern, we must uncover it. Ignoring it only allows it to grow." Tension filled the virtual room. Behind their composed facades, Marcus saw the gears turning, self-preservation battling with moral clarity. But he hadn't come to seek permission. His decision had already been made. "Skybound isn't just about flying planes," he continued. "We set standards, we shape culture, and I refuse to compromise those values." One by one, the directors logged off. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, a blend of resolve and weariness settling in his bones. He was waging a war on multiple fronts, and some of the people he needed most weren't fully with him. His phone buzzed, a message from Emily Carter, the manager at the bistro. Her words cut through his momentary pause like a bolt of electricity. "The pilots are still here, drinking, making comments again. A passenger recorded them." "All." Marcus stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. Outside, a storm brewed on the horizon, the dark clouds mirroring the fury simmering within him. This wasn't over, not even close. Meanwhile, Emily Carter tried to steady her nerves. She had managed the Southern Sky Bistro through chaotic shifts, customer outbursts, and last-minute crises, but today had unsettled her like nothing else. Locking her office door behind her, she felt the weight of responsibility press against her chest. Marcus Green had asked to meet her in the VIP lounge. The request was polite, but there was no mistaking the gravity behind it. She walked down the corridor, trying to smooth her blouse with shaking hands. The implications were clear. One misstep could spell disaster. Not just for her, but for the entire establishment she had helped shape. Marcus was already seated when she arrived. He looked composed, though his eyes told another story. Focused, contemplative, quietly brimming with intensity. His notebook sat closed on the table in front of him. When he gestured to the chair across from him, she sat. "Miss Carter," he greeted with quiet authority. "Mr. Green?" she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I appreciate you coming so quickly," Marcus began. "I understand today hasn't been easy. I'd like to hear your account of what happened after I left." Emily inhaled deeply, collecting her thoughts. "The pilots stayed. Jake Peterson and Tony Rohr. They ordered more drinks and continued their conversation. Loud, disrespectful. Several guests seemed uncomfortable. A few left early." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "What were they saying?" Emily shifted, her discomfort clear. "They mocked your company's policies?" "Especially on diversity and inclusion. They claimed promotions were given out based on quotas. It wasn't just tasteless, it was cruel. One of our regulars recorded part of it. They showed me before leaving." I haven't watched it fully, but I thought you should have it. She placed her phone on the table, the screen already queued up. Marcus took it, studied her for a moment, then pressed play. Despite background clatter, Jake's voice came through clearly. It's laughable. They pretend it's about merit. We all know they're just ticking boxes. Tony's chuckle followed. Exactly. It's a circus. They're handing out jobs to people who don't belong. Marcus stopped the video. His jaw flexed, then relaxed. He placed the phone gently on the table. "Thank you," he said evenly. "This needs to be addressed." Emily looked at him, a vulnerability in her voice. "Mr. Green, if I may, I've seen this kind of behavior before, not just from guests, but from coworkers. It comes in jokes, in comments. You learn to stay quiet. Speaking up can feel like stepping into a spotlight you don't want." Marcus leaned in. "Risky how?" She looked down. "Because people like me? We work so hard to get where we are. One wrong word, one accusation taken the wrong way, and you're done. People whisper. You get less support. You become inconvenient." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know that fear. I've lived it. But silence only gives the problem more room to grow." Emily's voice softened. "That's why I'm telling you now. If I can help, I will." His tone gentled. "You already have. But this isn't just about two pilots. This is about our culture, and it needs to change." He reached into his briefcase and retrieved a sleek tablet. "I'll need that video for our internal review, and if you hear or see anything else, anything, I want to know." Outside, the storm was growing. Inside, Marcus Green was done waiting. The time for quiet resolve was over. The reckoning had begun. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "I'll gather everything I can." As she handed over the video, Marcus's phone buzzed with a sharp vibration. He glanced down, his expression darkening. A report had come in from Skybound's HR department. 2 complaints had been previously filed against Jake Peterson, both dismissed quietly, both labeled as resolved. Each had been flagged for bias issues, but closed under the oversight of a senior director. Marcus placed the phone on the table, a storm forming behind his steady eyes. This wasn't just about Jake or Tony anymore. This was about the entire scaffolding that had allowed this type of behavior to root itself deep into the company's foundation. "Miss Carter," he said finally, his tone unshakable. "This isn't about a few individuals anymore. This is systemic." Emily met his gaze, a new steel forming behind her worry. "Then let's fix it." Marcus nodded. "We will." The conference room at Skybound Airlines headquarters exuded power. Tall glass walls enclosed a space framed in dark wood and chrome, with a gleaming mahogany table running its full length. Marcus stood at the far end, hands resting firmly on a stack of documents that were now heavier with meaning. Jake Peterson and Tony Rohr sat across from him. Their posture was casual, but their eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Marcus had insisted on a face-to-face meeting. HR had advised against it, but Marcus didn't want distance. He wanted impact. Jake offered a smirk, leaning back in his chair. Didn't expect the CEO himself to get involved in employee feedback. Tony chuckled, arms crossed. "Guess we're more important than we thought." Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he methodically opened the folder and laid out its contents. Copies of emails, formal complaints, internal memos. A silent, undeniable paper trail. "This isn't feedback," Marcus began, his voice like tempered steel. "It's a pattern, and it conflicts with everything this company stands for." Jake's smirk faltered but didn't vanish. "With respect, I've been here over a decade. My record speaks for itself." Marcus nodded slowly. "It does, which makes these documents even more troubling." He gestured toward the complaints. 2 formal reports, both dismissed. Do you have an explanation? Jake shrugged, trying for indifference. People overreact. Some folks can't handle blunt truth. Doesn't make their claims valid. Marcus remained unblinking. These aren't criticisms. They're allegations of exclusion, targeted remarks, intimidation. That's not candor. That's misconduct. Tony shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Come on, Mr. Green, we're just pilots. We fly the planes, we're not trying to be political here. You represent this company every time you put on that uniform, Marcus replied. What you say matters. What you believe seeps into how you lead, how you work. We cannot ignore that. Jake leaned forward, voice hardening. All due respect, I don't think someone like you really gets what it takes to survive in this industry. It's not about feelings. It's about skill. Always has been. The room froze. Marcus's face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Without a word, he slid a document toward Jake. This, he said evenly, is a transcript of the video recorded yesterday at the bistro. You mocked our values, our people, our culture. Is that your version of professionalism? Jake swallowed but kept his chin high. That video doesn't mean anything. People vent. Off the clock. That shouldn't cost careers. This is all damage control for your image, isn't it? Marcus leaned in, voice unwavering. This isn't about image. This is about culture. And the fact that you're sitting here dodging responsibility instead of owning your actions says everything I need to know. Silence fell again, thicker now. Tony looked to Jake, uncertain. Jake clenched his jaw but said nothing. Marcus straightened, gathering the documents. Effective immediately, he said. You are both suspended from duty, pending full investigation. All staff will undergo mandatory training on equity, inclusion, and workplace ethics. This isn't just about you. It's about the standard we must uphold. Jake sprang from his chair. You can't be serious. You're blowing this out of proportion. Marcus met his anger with steel. What's out of proportion is how long this has been allowed to continue. My decision is final. Tony didn't move. His eyes dropped to the table, a mixture of guilt and fatigue on his face. Jake stood, fuming, his voice laced with venom. You really think a few meetings will change anything? You're naive. The system's bigger than you. Marcus took a breath, his voice calm but heavy with resolve. Then I'll rebuild the system from the inside out. That's my responsibility. Jake stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Tony followed a few seconds later, slower, quieter. Marcus watched them go, already pivoting to what came next. Back in his office, he opened his laptop. The adrenaline of confrontation had faded, leaving a sense of urgency in its place. He began cross-referencing HR files and internal reports. Patterns emerged, names repeated, complaints overlapped. There was a consistency in how bias was flagged and then ignored. His fingers hovered above the keyboard as a realization settled over him. This wasn't an isolated issue. It was embedded in the fabric of the company. And now, finally, it was his to unravel. It wasn't just Jake and Tony anymore. Marcus stared at the evidence scattered before him, the threads of something far more insidious coming into view. There was a network at play, a latticework of silent complicity that shielded those who perpetuated the very behaviors he had spent years trying to eradicate. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of realization bearing down. This isn't just a few bad apples, he muttered, his voice low and grim. It's the whole damn tree. Sunlight bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The distant hum of engines reverberated like an omen. On his desk, a stack of HR reports sat like loaded weapons, not with bullets, but with truths too long buried. The air felt heavy, saturated with the burden of decisions yet to come. Just as Marcus was wrapping up a briefing, Edward Harris requested a private word. Harris, a board veteran, was a man who wore pragmatism like armor. To some, that meant wisdom. To Marcus, it reeked of self-preservation. "Marcus," Edward said, his voice clipped, "I've reviewed your decision to suspend Peterson and Ruhr, and frankly, I'm concerned. This is turning into a spectacle." Marcus folded his hands, eyes steady. "We discussed this. It's not about them as individuals. It's about a deeper issue we've allowed to fester unchecked." Edward scoffed. "You're blowing it out of proportion. Pilots joke. They vent. That's not the same as sabotage. But you're making Skybound look unstable. Do you really think the public wants to see this kind of dirty laundry?" "This isn't about perception," Marcus said, his voice calm but growing firmer. "It's about integrity, and letting this slide would be the real threat to our future." Edward narrowed his eyes. "You've already made headlines." He slid his phone across the desk. Marcus picked it up, his breath slowing as he read. "Internal turmoil at Skybound Airlines. CEO's controversial crackdown raises eyebrows." The article portrayed Marcus as a ruthless leader on a political crusade, accusing him of leveraging diversity for personal gain. "This was leaked," Marcus said tightly, though the pain in his voice was harder to hide. "Maybe," Edward said, standing. "Or maybe people are just tired of being policed. Either way, think carefully. The board won't back you forever." Marcus watched Edward walk out, jaw clenched. Resistance was expected, but this? Public scrutiny, anonymous leaks, internal betrayal. It added layers of complexity to a battle already hard fought. That afternoon, he sat with the communications team, the room buzzing with nervous chatter. Ideas flew. Deny, deflect, delay. Marcus sat quietly, absorbing it all. "Mr. Green," one of the leads asked cautiously, "should we issue a response or let this fade?" Marcus looked up, his decision unwavering. "No spin, no cover-ups. We release a statement. We acknowledge the investigation, and we double down on our commitment to fairness. We tell the truth." The team nodded, the air heavy with tension, but also clarity. As the room emptied, Marcus lingered. Outside, the sky painted a melancholy gradient of blues and grays. The horizon reminded him of another time, when he was young, a rookie pilot being mocked by his superior during training. No one had stood up for him. The shame, the silence, the quiet collapse of confidence. It had taken years to overcome. Years to build something that gave others the chance he was denied. Changed since he was denied. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Mr. Green," came a voice, distorted and cold. "You don't know me, but I know what you're doing." Marcus froze. "Who is this?" "Someone who understands how things work," the voice replied, calm but chilling. "You're poking a bear, Marcus. Keep going and you'll regret it. So will your company." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the screen. He had expected resistance. But this wasn't resistance. This was a warning, a threat, proof of something darker beneath the surface. Outside, daylight surrendered to shadows. Inside, Marcus Green steadied himself. There was no turning back. The soft glow of his desk lamp illuminated stacks of reports, his notes, and new revelations. The office was nearly empty, silent except for the occasional creak of the buildings settling around him. The more he reviewed, the clearer it became. The issue was systemic. Names repeated. Complaints vanished. Supervisors were copied on emails, yet took no action. Some of the most egregious offenders were shielded by senior managers. Policies were revised not to correct, but to obscure. This wasn't negligence. It was a structure intentionally built to protect. A knock. "Come in," Marcus called, his voice lined with exhaustion. Emily Carter stepped in. She looked like she hadn't slept, but there was a fire behind her eyes. She handed him a slim folder, gripping her phone tightly. "I've been looking into the internal communications you asked about," she said, settling across from him. "You need to see this." Inside were emails, printed and highlighted. One exchange stood out. Jake Peterson corresponding with Thomas Grayson, a senior director. The tone was disturbingly casual as they discussed undermining Marcus's hiring reforms. They referred to the diversity policies as PR fluff. "They're not just protecting each other," Emily said quietly. "They're actively working against you." Marcus placed the folder down slowly. "Anything else?" Emily hesitated. "Yes. I overheard Jake and Grayson in the bistro. Jake was furious about the suspension. Grayson told him not to worry, that they were handling it. Then Jake laughed and said something about how they'd deal with you if you didn't back off." Marcus inhaled sharply but remained composed. "Are you sure?" "I am," she said firmly. "I didn't catch every word, but it wasn't just frustration. It was calculated." Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. The puzzle pieces were forming a picture. And that picture was dangerous. He wasn't just facing cultural resistance, he was facing a coordinated effort, a silent coup against progress. But for the first time, he could see the enemy clearly. And he was done playing defense. Marcus Green stood at the precipice of something far larger than he ever anticipated. What began as a disciplinary response had unraveled into a campaign, coordinated, calculated, to erode not only his leadership, but the very values he had embedded into skybound airlines. And now, he wasn't just defending policy, he was fighting for the soul of the company. "This is bigger than I thought," he finally admitted, meeting Emily Carter's steady gaze. "And it's going to get worse before it gets better." "What do you want to do?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he typed something quickly into his phone. "First, we need more evidence. If we're going to confront this, we need an airtight case. No cracks, no weak points." He looked up. "I just submitted a request for deeper access into internal records." He set the phone down deliberately. "In the meantime, stay alert. If you hear or see anything, no matter how small, bring it to me immediately." Emily nodded, her jaw tightening with resolve. "I will." Marcus rose and walked to the window. The city skyline shimmered beneath a blanket of stars, its beauty muted by the weight pressing on his chest. "I expected resistance," he said quietly, "but not sabotage. This isn't just about old habits. They're trying to wipe out progress." Emily stepped forward, her voice steady. "You're not alone, Mr. Green. There are people who believe in what you're doing. I believe in it." Marcus turned, gratitude softening his expression. "That means more than you know." After she left, Marcus returned to his desk, reopening the folder of damning evidence. Each document felt heavier now, imbued with intent. This wasn't passive opposition, it was active subversion, and it had to be met with precision, patience, and allies. He didn't know yet who he could trust, but he knew he couldn't afford to wait. The hours passed, but Marcus didn't sleep. As he worked, one phrase kept looping in his mind. "They think they can stop me." He whispered it aloud. But they're wrong. The next day, Marcus sat across from Helen Saunders, Skybound's trusted legal counsel. Her office was sleek, her expression sharper than the angles of the room's modern decor. "This investigation is growing by the hour," Marcus began. "It's not just misconduct, it's an organized effort to dismantle everything we've worked to build." Helen's brows lifted. "So, it's systemic?" Marcus nodded. "Deeply. but every step forward seems to provoke more public backlash. We're walking a thin legal and reputational line. Ellen considered his words, tapping a pen against her notepad. Legally, you're within your rights, but if you expose senior leadership, there are risks. Lawsuits, shareholder pressure, maybe even federal scrutiny. Marcus leaned back. So, the question is, do I dig deeper and risk destabilizing the company, or step back and let them win? Helen's voice softened. The real question is, what matters more? The company's short-term comfort or its long-term integrity? Marcus stared at the floor, her words sinking in. He had always built Skybound on principles. Now those very principles were under siege. After a long pause, he sat up straight. Then I take the risk. Because if we don't root this out now, it will only spread. Helen nodded. Then gather every bit of evidence, build your case, and when the time comes, strike with absolute clarity. Back in his office, Marcus found Emily waiting. She held a folder in one hand and her phone in the other. If we're going to bring this down, she said, we need more than memos and complaints. I've been talking to the staff at the Biestro, quietly. That's where they're most careless. Marcus shook his head. It's too dangerous. If they catch wind of your involvement. Emily stepped forward. With respect, this isn't just your fight. I'm willing to take the risk. He searched her face, saw the conviction there. Finally, he sighed. Okay, but be careful and report everything, immediately. Over the next few days, Emily worked quietly. She asked questions, listened closely, and took careful notes. One evening, Marcus received a message from her. I have something you need to hear. They met in a private conference room. She handed him a USB drive. One of the servers caught this by accident, she said. They didn't realize what it was until they listened. Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop. His pulse quickened. The recording began. Jake's voice came through, relaxed, arrogant. Do they think they're going to clean up this place? Good luck. Grayson and the others have been running the show for years. They're not about to let some diversity crusade ruin it. Another voice added, yeah, and if Green keeps pushing, he'll find out the hard way. You don't mess with the system. Marcus paused the recording, his hands clenched around the laptop. They're not just resisting change, he said, his voice tight. They're plotting to keep this corruption alive. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. What do we do now? Marcus leaned back, eyes locked on the screen. We keep going. We build the case. This is only the beginning. That night, Marcus sat alone in his penthouse. The hum of planes outside mirrored the unease inside. He sipped cold tea and stared at the ceiling. The reports, the recordings, the threats. It all pointed to one crushing truth. He had underestimated his enemies. He had envisioned Skybound as a beacon, but now he questioned if it could ever shine. Had he overreached? Could one man undo decades of rot? Still, the thought of giving up churned his stomach. Then came the buzz of his phone, a notification. Board meeting confirmed, 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. Prepare your statement. Marcus set the phone down. The moment had come. The board, many of whom had remained neutral, were now demanding answers. The next day, he would face them all. And this time, there would be no turning back. Their faces were a blend of concern, skepticism, and tightly veiled apprehension as Marcus entered the boardroom. Behind them, the skyline gleamed beneath a pale morning sun, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Edward Harris sat in the center, his expression unreadable as he gestured toward the head of the table. Marcus, he said in a clipped, formal tone, we've convened to address the growing unrest within Skybound. Your recent actions have raised serious concerns." Marcus inhaled deeply and looked around the table. "I understand the pressure this has put on all of us. But let's be clear, this isn't about personal agendas or PR. This is about integrity and accountability." Linda Travers interrupted. "Integrity matters, Marcus, but so does stability. The media storm is out of control. If we don't contain it, the damage to our brand might be irreversible." Edward nodded sharply. "We need to refocus, end the investigation, rebuild our image." Marcus clenched his jaw. "You mean sweeping it under the rug? That's not leadership, that's cowardice." Edward leaned forward. "And what's your plan? Drag the entire company through public mud until we've alienated employees, shareholders, and customers?" "This company was founded on doing things differently," Marcus replied firmly. "If we back down now, we prove our values are hollow." A tense silence filled the room. Thomas Grayson finally spoke, his voice low, his smile cutting. "With all due respect, Marcus, your crusade is destabilizing everything. Staff morale is down, customers are uncertain, and the media, they're feasting. You're not saving the company, you're unraveling it." Marcus turned to him. "Would you have us ignore the evidence? Let Jake Peterson continue as if nothing happened?" Grayson smirked. "Jake's not perfect, but he's one of our best. You're willing to throw him away for optics?" "It's not optics," Marcus said, voice low but firm. "It's about respect, about building a workplace that doesn't tolerate subtle cruelty dressed up as tradition." Grayson leaned back, dismissive. "Idealists never last in this business." Marcus leaned in. "I didn't step into this role to survive, Thomas. I came to lead, and sometimes leadership means doing the hard thing." The room tensed again, every eye on Marcus. After a pause, Edward cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene next week. Until then, I advise you to consider your path carefully." The room emptied, but Marcus remained, staring out at the skyline. The pressure was mounting. He could feel the foundation cracking. Still, he couldn't let go now. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "We've got another lead. Call me ASAP." Later that evening, as Marcus stood by the window of his office, Emily entered. She placed a stack of documents on his desk, her eyes fierce. "I found something," she said. Marcus joined her, concern written across his face. "What is it?" She opened a folder. A memo from 5 years ago, buried deep in HR archives. It deprioritized performance reviews for minority employees under the pretense of efficiency, but the language makes it clear it was targeted. Marcus scanned the document. Phrases like "maintain traditional structures" and "preserve core leadership values" glared at him like red alerts. The next sheet named names, familiar ones: Thomas Grayson, Edward Harris, 2 other senior board members. "They weren't just complicit," Emily said softly. "They orchestrated it, and they've been protecting each other ever since." Marcus flipped page after page, downgraded reviews, blocked promotions, coded language in emails. The web was vast and intentional. He closed the folder slowly. "This changes everything. If we move forward, it won't just expose a few bad actors. It'll shake the board itself. That's why I brought it to you. But if you do this, Mr. Green, be prepared. They won't go down quietly." Marcus nodded. "I didn't come this far to retreat." The following morning, Marcus walked into the boardroom carrying the folder. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Edward watched him carefully. Before anyone could speak, Marcus placed the folder on the table. "Before we begin, there's something you need to see." "Marcus," Edward warned, "we have a full agenda." "This can't wait," Marcus said, his voice slicing through the room. He distributed the documents. "These are memos and reports, some dating back 5 years. They reveal systemic discrimination, buried intentionally to protect power. Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Edward paled as he read, "Where did you get these?" "From HR archives. They were hidden, but they expose a deliberate pattern to hold certain people back." Grayson sneered. "You're risking everything for old paperwork? You'll destroy this company." "What destroys us," Marcus replied, "is pretending this never happened." Linda Travers spoke up. "Marcus is right. If we ignore this, we betray everything we claim to stand for." Debate erupted. Arguments clashed. Accusations flew. Through it all, Marcus stood firm. Finally, as the room quieted, he spoke again. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here to lead. And as of today, I'm initiating a full internal investigation. No more silence, no more shadows." And with that, Marcus Green took the first step into the most difficult chapter of his leadership, not to protect the brand, but to save the soul of Skybound Airlines. All activities related to hiring, promotions, and employee reviews will be audited by an independent third party, Marcus announced firmly, addressing the boardroom with clarity. "And these findings will be shared with our employees and stakeholders." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room, but no one dared challenge him directly. The evidence was overwhelming, and the resolve in his voice was unshakable. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus returned to his office. The adrenaline of the confrontation slowly faded, replaced by a calm determination. He stood at his window as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden hues over the city. Then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "It's starting to spread. People are already talking about the investigation." Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. The war was far from won, but a corner had been turned. Morning light filtered into Marcus's office, quiet and still. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, but inside, a storm brewed. On his desk lay the folder of damning documents, a roadmap of corruption. This was the moment of no return. He picked up his phone. "Jessica," he said to his assistant, "get the senior leadership team on a call. 15 minutes, no delays." The meeting room filled quickly. Faces appeared on screen, managers, department heads, all tense, all curious. Marcus appeared, his image crisp, his demeanor unreadable. "Thank you all for joining. Effective immediately, any personnel involved in the internal network that has undermined Skybound's mission will be suspended, pending full investigation." Gasps filled the call. One manager spoke cautiously. "Does this include senior staff?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "No one is exempt. Accountability begins at the top." The room stirred, but Marcus raised a hand. "This is non-negotiable. If we let this continue, we risk everything this company is built on." After the call, he sat in silence, exhaustion finally finding him, but he knew he had chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. Later, he stood before a sea of reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were pointed like weapons. "Good afternoon," Marcus began, voice even. "Skybound Airlines reaffirms our commitment to integrity, respect, and equality. Recent events have exposed conduct that betrays our values. We are taking decisive action." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. This company was built on the belief that we could lead differently. That belief is being tested, but I promise, we will not falter. A reporter stood. "Mr. Green, do you fear the fallout? Could this affect operations?" Marcus nodded. "There are risks, but greater is the risk of allowing injustice to thrive. This is about our future." Another asked, "What about Peterson and Rohr? Rumors say this is personal." Marcus held steady. "The evidence speaks for itself. This is about a system, not individuals, and we will dismantle it." Behind the scenes, Jake and Tony scrambled, trying to control the narrative, but leaked texts, screenshots, and first-hand testimony overwhelmed their denials. The truth was louder than any spin. As the press conference closed, Marcus looked out over the crowd. Some faces held skepticism, others hope. He leaned forward one last time. Skybound will not be defined by past mistakes, but by the actions we take to correct them. Justice is not a slogan, it is action. Silence followed. The cameras captured every second. Marcus left the podium with his shoulders square. He had never felt more certain. That evening, the grand ballroom at the Hyatt Regency was alive with polite conversation and hushed tension. The annual Skybound Corporate Responsibility Summit had become a crucible. This was no longer about progress reports. It was about legacy. Marcus stood by the stage, surveying the crowd. He knew tonight would define the future. As the audience settled, he stepped into the spotlight. Applause followed, polite but cautious. "Good evening," Marcus began. "Tonight, we reflect not only on progress but on truth. Transparency is more than a value. It is a commitment, and it's why I stand here today." He continued, "We've uncovered patterns of behavior that go against everything we claim to represent. These were not isolated, they were systemic, and we will confront them." From the crowd, Thomas Grayson stood. "If I may," he interrupted, his voice loud. "I support accountability, but we must also acknowledge the damage this investigation has done." He approached the stage with confident strides. "Skybound is a leader, but this excessive focus on divisive issues is alienating our base. Surely, Marcus, you see that." Marcus let the silence linger. Then he stepped forward. "Thomas," he said, calm but unyielding, "leadership isn't about keeping the peace when the foundation is cracking. It's about having the courage to rebuild." Grayson scoffed. "And the layoffs? The plummeting morale? That's leadership to you?" Marcus looked him square in the eye. "I never said it would be easy, but I'd rather face turbulence in truth than comfort in corruption." The room fell still. Journalists scribbled furiously. Employees sat straighter. Shareholders leaned in. The moment wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. Marcus Green wasn't just fighting for Skybound. He was redefining what leadership meant in modern corporate America. And this time, he wasn't standing alone. The tension in the room was palpable, and all eyes were on Marcus. Without hesitation, he reached for the folder he had brought with him and held it up. "This," Marcus said, his voice steady, "is a collection of internal documents detailing years of discriminatory practices within our company. It includes memos, performance reviews, and emails implicating several individuals, including you, Thomas." Grayson's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "And what exactly do you think this proves? People make mistakes, policies evolve, you're clinging to the past instead of focusing on the future." Marcus opened the folder, pulling out a single sheet. "This isn't about the past," he said. "This is about a system that was deliberately designed to exclude and silence. And it wasn't just tolerated, it was protected." The room fell silent as Marcus read aloud excerpts from the documents. His voice was unwavering, each word a scalpel cutting through decades of denial. He detailed the policies that had been implemented, the employees who had been passed over, and the culture of fear that had taken root under the guise of tradition. When he finished, Marcus turned to face Grayson directly. "Leadership isn't about protecting the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. It's about ensuring that every voice is heard, every employee is valued, and every policy reflects our commitment to fairness. If you can't stand behind that, Thomas, then perhaps you're the one who doesn't belong here." The room erupted into applause, loud and genuine. Grayson's face was a mix of anger and disbelief as he stepped back, momentarily speechless. Marcus took the opportunity to address the audience once more. "Skybound's future depends on all of us. employees, leaders, and stakeholders, working together to build a company we can all be proud of. This isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about creating something better. As the applause swelled, a figure approached the stage. Marcus recognized him immediately. Richard Caldwell, a former mentor and one of the first black pilots to achieve captain status at Skybound decades ago. Richard had retired years earlier, but remained a respected figure in the industry. "Marcus," Richard said, taking the microphone. "I've been watching from the sidelines, but I couldn't stay silent any longer. What you're doing takes courage, and it reminds me of why I joined this company in the first place. If you need someone to stand with you, you've got me." The room erupted into cheers, the energy shifting decisively in Marcus's favor. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a surge of hope, not just for the company, but for the people who believed in its potential. The tension in the boardroom returned as Marcus Green stepped into the room. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows on the polished mahogany table. The assembled directors sat in stiff silence, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Among them were Thomas Grayson and Edward Harris, radiating the defiance Marcus had come to expect. Jake Peterson and Tony Rohr stood near the back, flanked by employees loyal to the old guard. Jake's smirk was fixed, the kind of grin that suggested he believed he was untouchable. Marcus calmly took his seat at the head of the table, placing a slim folder in front of him. His composure remained unshaken, though his mind raced, preparing for what would be the most contentious meeting of his career. Edward cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence. "Marcus," he began, his tone clipped, "we've called this meeting to address the fallout from your recent actions. It's clear your approach has created significant unrest. Employees are frustrated. The media is relentless. Morale is at an all-time low." Marcus nodded slightly, folding his hands. Unrest was inevitable the moment we decided to confront the systemic issues that have festered in this company for years. Thomas Grayson interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. "What you call systemic issues, Marcus, many of us call tradition. The policies you're attacking have kept this company afloat. If you continue on this path, you'll destroy everything Skybound stands for." Marcus turned to Grayson, his expression unreadable. "If what Skybound stands for is exclusion and inequality, then it's time to tear it down and rebuild." Before Grayson could respond, Jake stepped forward, his smirk widening. "Spoken like someone who doesn't understand how this industry works. Let me spell it out for you, Marcus. You will never break this system. It's been here long before you, and it'll be here long after you're gone." The room went quiet. Marcus met Jake's gaze, refusing to be baited. He reached for the folder in front of him and opened it. "I expected resistance," Marcus said, pulling out a stack of documents. "What I didn't expect was the audacity of this network you've built. These are records of your communications, Jake. Emails, texts, meeting notes, detailing your efforts to undermine not just me, but the very policies that define this company." Jake's smirk faltered. "Anyone can cherry-pick documents to fit a narrative. This doesn't prove anything." Marcus flipped to another page. "It proves you've colluded with senior management to block promotions, sabotage employees you deemed unfit, and protect those who share your outdated views. And let's not forget the video evidence of your comments at the bistro." Jake's posture stiffened. "You're just trying to shift blame. This company is falling apart because of you, not me." Marcus stood. His voice rose slightly. "This company is struggling because we've ignored these problems for too long. Jake isn't the only one responsible, but he is a key player in a system that prioritizes power over progress." Jake's face turned red, his fists clenched. "You think you're some kind of hero? All you've done is divide us. You don't belong here, Marcus. You never did." Marcus turned to the board, his tone calm. This isn't about me. It's about whether we're willing to stand by our values or let people like Jake dictate the future of this company. Jake, unable to contain his rage, stepped forward. Values? Don't make me laugh. You're destroying this company with your self-righteous crusade. No one cares about your values. They care about results. The room was silent. Marcus watched him carefully. Finally, Jake sneered. You think you've won, but you haven't. People like me will always find a way. That's the beauty of the system. It protects us. Not people like you. A murmur spread through the room. The weight of Jake's words was immediate. He froze, realizing too late the gravity of what he had just admitted. Marcus turned to the board. You've all heard him. This isn't just about policy. It's about who we are as a company. If we don't take action now, we're complicit. The boardroom erupted into whispered debate. Jake's supporters looked shaken. Others appeared resigned. Marcus remained standing. This ends today. We either move forward together or let this company fall apart. The choice is yours. The boardroom fell into a heavy silence as Marcus prepared to deliver the final verdict. The room was still as Marcus Green delivered the final, irrevocable blow. Effective immediately, Jake Peterson, Tony Rohr, and all individuals identified as part of the network undermining our company's integrity are hereby terminated. His voice carried the weight of weeks spent navigating betrayal, deceit, and moral peril. Around the room, the board's reactions varied: shock, relief, silent nods of approval from a few like Linda Travers, but the tension radiating from Thomas Grayson was unmistakable. Marcus didn't flinch. This isn't just about removing a few bad actors. It's about making a definitive stand. Skybound Airlines will no longer tolerate systems or behaviors that compromise our values or endanger our people. He turned to Helen Saunders. Ms. Saunders, you'll oversee the immediate implementation of these terminations. Ensure every step complies with legal standards and treat those affected with the respect we ourselves failed to uphold. Helen gave a curt nod. Understood, Mr. Green. Letting the moment settle, Marcus continued. This moment marks the beginning of our most critical transformation. I am introducing a comprehensive reform plan. It includes the formation of an independent oversight committee that will monitor hiring, promotions, and employee treatment. This committee will report directly to the board and provide quarterly transparency updates. Some directors shifted in their seats, visibly rattled. Marcus pressed on. We will also roll out mandatory company-wide training designed to foster a culture of respect and inclusion. This isn't cosmetic, it's structural. Marcus, Grayson interrupted, his tone clipped and defensive. These changes are drastic. They'll disrupt operations, inflate budgets. Marcus interrupted, calm but unyielding. The cost of doing nothing is far greater. We either evolve or watch Skybound collapse under the weight of its own rot. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Edward Harris spoke. I don't agree with your methods, Marcus, but I can't deny your conviction. Let's hope your gamble pays off. The meeting adjourned, but Marcus remained. Alone, he gathered his notes, the adrenaline fading, the toll of his choices settling deep in his chest. By midday, news of Skybound's internal shakeup made national headlines. Skybound CEO declares war on internal corruption, one read. Analysts buzzed, social media ignited, and former skeptics took notice. Employees gathered in break rooms to process the seismic shift. I didn't think he'd actually do it, a flight attendant murmured, her phone glowing with the headline. But it's about time someone did. Despite applause from many, some grumbled. In quiet corners, a few muttered warnings. He's killing the business with this idealism, said a senior mechanic. Still, Marcus's inbox filled with messages of gratitude. many from employees past and present who had once felt invisible. That evening, Marcus stood by his window, the airport outside alive with blinking lights and taxiing planes. A sense of peace touched him, brief but real. He had won a battle, but not the war. Still, tonight he allowed himself a rare smile. "This is just the start," he whispered. The next morning, early light filtered into his office as Marcus held an old photograph. Himself, younger, proud, standing beside a regional jet. He'd once believed that skill and willpower alone would carry him, but he had learned otherwise. He had lived every quiet slight, every condescending smirk. Now as CEO, he realized that fight had never ended. It had only grown bigger. But this time, he wasn't alone. A knock broke his reflection. "Come in." Emily Carter stepped inside. Her title now read Cultural Advisor, but her spirit was unchanged, sharp, determined. "Good morning, Mr. Green. I've got the first reports from the Oversight Committee. Feedback's been mostly encouraging. The training programs are rolling out. Resistance remains, but not unexpected." "Change never is," Marcus replied, "but it's necessary." Emily hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for trusting me with this role. I won't let you down." Marcus gave a faint smile. "You earned it. Your courage gave this company a conscience." As she left, Marcus returned to his screen. Emails, proposals, reform drafts. Piece by piece, the company was being rebuilt. Weeks passed, the reforms took hold, employees found their voice again. A pilot in training felt for the first time like she belonged. Supervisors listened more. The culture of silence began to break. Yet not everyone welcomed the change. A vocal minority clung to old traditions. Marcus faced them head-on, firm but fair. "This isn't about dismantling tradition, it's about redefining it." One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, unmarked. "Dear Mr. Green, I've been with Skybound for 2 years. I never thought I'd make it. People like me usually don't. But I've watched what you did, how you stood up when it mattered. And now, I believe I have a chance. Not because of what I look like, but because I finally feel seen. Thank you. Sincerely, a grateful pilot." Marcus set the letter down, his throat tight. He looked out at a plane cutting through the sky, its wings flashing gold in the sun. That moment held everything. The pain, the risk, the reward. In the auditorium at headquarters, the company prepared for its corporate responsibility summit. Marcus adjusted his tie backstage, the hum of voices beyond the curtain rising. Today wasn't about celebration. It was about truth. When he stepped onto the stage, applause swelled. He waited, then spoke. "Good afternoon. Today, Skybound reaffirms its mission, not just to fly, but to lead." He revealed charts, statistics, and testimonials. Screens displayed young employees whose voices were now heard, whose careers were no longer capped by prejudice. A young pilot's story played, one of hope, not anger. "We've begun the work," Marcus said, "but this is just the beginning." The room rose in standing ovation, and Marcus, at the center of it all, stood steady, a man who had dared to dream that an old system could be made new. And from the crowd, Richard Caldwell, one of the company's first black captains, stepped forward. His voice cracked with emotion. "You reminded me why I once believed in this company, and why I still do." That night, as lights dimmed and people filed out, Marcus remained backstage. The burden was still there, but so was hope, real, radiant, earned. He looked up. "We're not done," he whispered, "but we've finally begun."